It's hard for us to see into the future, but the film 2073 gives us a look at just one of the possibilities. A world almost unrecognizable as citizens of New San Francisco face the fall of democracy and the harrowing effects of climate change. Sound familiar? This genre-bending documentary imagines the future based on what is happening today, looking at the rise of billionaires, fascistic leaders, unchecked capitalism, and of course, mass surveillance, from the US to India to the UK, Israel, and more, with prominent writers and journalists sharing their experiences and fears. It's a chilling journey into the future with no privacy, no freedom, no democracy, and frankly, a warning of what is to come if we let oligarchs go unchecked. Joining me now to discuss is the award-winning British director of this documentary, Asif Kapadia, who you may know from documentaries such as Senna, Amy, and Diego Maradona. Asif, thank you so much for coming on Mehdi Unfiltered.
Thanks for having me on. Good to be talking to you.
As I just said there in the intro, you're best known for your films about real-life people and their stories. Senna, Amy Winehouse, Diego Maradona. But 2073 is very different. What called you to make this particular film, to focus on this particular global phenomenon rather than a real person?
So with this particular film, I had a feeling, I just had a feeling of what was going on and what was happening around the world. And I felt I needed to do something. You know, I'm a filmmaker. The only thing I know is how to make movies. So what I've done is, previously I've made fiction films. I did a film, The Warrior, I did Far North, I've worked on TV shows, and I've made the docs that you mentioned. With this film, I thought the whole world feels really dystopian. Everything that happens every day that I read, everything I see happening around me. And I thought, well, how do I express this feeling, this fear about where we're heading? I started the film in 2020. And so my feeling was, if I can frame it somehow in a movie using drama and documentary and set it in the near future, people have read books or seen movies or TV series, and they can sort of take it. But my feeling with this one was, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the future, but using elements of the present. And that's where archive comes in.
And 2073, as you mentioned, it's a hybrid film, right? It blends a sci-fi narrative with contemporary documentary footage that becomes archive in the film. What made you want to blend those two modes of storytelling?
I just thought it was the right way to do it because I knew there wasn't going to be a central character. My aim with this film was to kind of almost have a God's eye view of the whole world.
Yes.
Because my background is from India, I've worked in Brazil, I've worked in Europe, I live in the UK, I've worked in the US. I just saw the same kind of elements, the same playbook happening everywhere. And I just thought, it's happening everywhere at the same time. Am I going crazy? Or should I speak to some people? And, you know, when our government here said, you know, the people are tired of experts, I like experts. I spoke to experts. I spoke to a lot of brilliant journalists, people who experts in democracy, the breakdown of democracy, surveillance, tech, the climate. And I just said, look, is it me or is something going on? And all of them said, no, there's something happening. And it's all happening right now, everywhere. And the thing that kind of is, in a way, pushing it and magnifying it was tech, was social media, was the way that information is being spread and pushing us in certain directions. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to put this into a movie, but I don't have a central character on purpose. So the central character, in a way, in the spine comes from the fiction. I wrote that to put it in, to give us something to cling on to as we fly around the world with these little time capsules that we created of archive events.
And it's done very smartly. You mentioned stuff that happens everywhere that you were noticing. Obviously, the climate crisis is something happening literally globally. The film highlights the aftermath, if we can call it that, of a climate crisis, showing us the dystopian city of New San Francisco, where Americans have tried to rebuild. The city has this Big Brother feel. There are drones, surveillance systems, even robot police dogs that we've seen in places like New York, I think, rolled out. How does the climate crisis exacerbate the rise of authoritarianism and the surveillance state? It's not a natural link that everyone draws, that climate change will exacerbate fascism and the surveillance state.
With people I spoke to, it's almost like if you can get people to believe that humans are not affecting the climate, you can get them to believe anything. Yes. Right? If you can say it's got nothing to do with fossil fuels, it's got nothing, we should dig more, we should make more money from that. The same people are saying, and actually don't believe this, believe that, and this is not up, this is down. You know, so that's what I found. And I think mostly people make these films and they sit in little boxes like, this is a climate film, and this is a film about a particular bad actor in one country, and this is another film about somebody else. And I just thought, well, it's all the same thing. So can I put it all into one movie? That was the idea. And the footage that we show of New San Francisco, and we show in the US, from forest fires, from the fact that you'll never see the sun again, basically it's all red, the red skies, all of that's real. I haven't manipulated that footage. That only happened a few years ago. And then what happens with a film like this is when you make it, it came out at the end of last year, just as the election was happening in the US, just as people are watching the film as the fires were happening just now in California. And you realize we've been warned about all this stuff. It happens again and again, and it's happening quicker and quicker. And it's all linked. The same people are telling you there's no problem over here, blame someone else, are the same people saying there's no problem over here, blame immigrants, or blame Mexicans, or blame people on boats, are the people destroying your life.
The film focuses on a bunch of different things that will lead to the collapse of society as we know it. Climate change, we mentioned, the financial crisis, the refugee crisis, the rise of technology, libertarian tech bros. The list goes on and on. I wonder, of all those issues, as you're making this film and speaking to experts, what concerns you the most? What do you deem to be the most urgent one that we need to really be focused on?
And a big one is and it's happening, right? I don't even know if we stop it, but it's the takeover of authoritarians. And money in politics seems to be the common denominator. For me, the film began with Brexit, what happened here in the UK, and the idea that people can be kind of lied to and tricked and fooled into making their lives worse, take away their own freedom, vote to kind of be poorer, and and blame foreigners, blame kind of immigrants, blame everyone else, but then not the people who kind of tricked you into doing it. They've all got European passports. So Brexit was a beginning of it for me, thinking, what is going on? Why are the journalists not questioning these people properly? The same people that when someone who denies there's a climate issue will come on television, and then there'll be one person saying there's no problem, and only one person saying, oh no, there is a problem, rather than 500 people saying there's a problem and one person denying it. It was never even. So I was watching the news and watching the way it was being presented, and I just kept thinking, am I going mad? Why is this happening? Why are they getting away with it? I went from being in the UK just after Brexit to being in the US and shooting in Pittsburgh on a TV show, Mindhunter, during the Clinton-Trump election. And I just was watching the shows each night, and the same language was being used, the same kind of phrases were being used, and the same people were on the stage. Nigel Farage was standing behind Trump. And I kept thinking, what's he doing there? I didn't know they all knew each other. And this is before I'd read anything in The Guardian, anything in the New York Times. I was seeing the connections between Brexit and what was happening with Trump back in 2016. So I kept thinking, oh, something's happening. My background being from India, I was aware of Modi from a long time. And what's been happening in Gujarat and what's happened across India, the more he divided people, the more popular he became using social media. So all of these things were in my head. So really, it's the breakdown of democracy and the push to authoritarianism, which I guess is the biggest issue. Everything else is linked to that, though.
Very well put. And yes, I've been banging on. Obviously, I'm also descended from, I'm the child of Indian immigrants to the UK. The Modi playbook, the Orban playbook, the Erdogan playbook, the Putin playbook, there is a global playbook. Trump is not unique in this stuff. He's drawing on what's already been done elsewhere.
As one of the journalists, Rana, said to me, Mehdi, she said it's like they're almost like all on a WhatsApp group. Guess what I just did? You're like, you did? Yeah, and it worked. No one stopped us. You should try it.
Very well put. That's Rana Ayyub, the Indian Muslim journalist who writes also for the Washington Post. Fantastic woman. Let me ask you this. You mentioned Rana, who's a great journalist. I've had her on previous shows of mine. You mentioned watching stuff in 2016, being in the US. You are a documentary maker, a filmmaker, an artist. You're not a news journalist, but obviously you're part of the media. What do you make of the mainstream media's coverage of the issues you're highlighting in the film? Did you feel you had to make 2073 because people aren't drawing the connections that you're seeing and drawing? How much has mainstream media, the New York Times, even the liberal media, the Guardian, the New York Times, the BBC, how much has it failed us?
I think it has. I think somewhere along the way, all of them have been kind of pushed and manipulated. People have been put in upstairs, and you just see that there's been a shift. You know, I'm old enough to see that shift happening, and the change from the people that are allowed on. Carol Cadwallader, for example, has never been on a BBC. I mean, she came on once on Breakfast TV. That was it. But then Nigel Farage, who was unelected, would have been 25 times on Question Time, which is like the big kind of political show. And you're just like, well, why is he on? He's unelected. Why is he constantly being highlighted and given a position to keep speaking to a huge audience?
He finally got elected, I think, at the 7th attempt, thanks to probably the BBC platforming him endlessly for years.
But that's helped. You know, the truth is the BBC, which I grew up loving, I travel a lot, I listen to the World Service, I love the news, I love it. And then something has changed. And I feel like, you could see the editorial policy kind of was affected and changed. And I think it's the same in the US. It's the same everywhere. So you're right. Journalists are not doing the job, it felt like, or they're being pressured from above to say things from a certain slant. And a lot of journalists, therefore, leave those organizations. And that's the problem. Once you leave, everything gets fragmented. You yourself have had an experience, which maybe you can talk about. So I've found this with lots of journalists around the world, that if you do kind of try to hold power to account, including news organizations, it may become uncomfortable for you to remain in that news organization.
That's a very fair point. Let me ask you this. A lot of people, look, the media's failing, and then you've got social media, and you've got people like Elon Musk shouting every day, "You are the media now," he says to his followers. "You are the media. The mainstream media doesn't exist. They're all liars. You are the media." And yet, the people who control these social media platforms are all now right-wing partisan hacks. They show up at the inauguration of Donald Trump on Monday. They get better seats than Donald Trump's own cabinet members. They're all in the tank for the Republican Party, for MAGA and Trump. Where does that leave us then if the most powerful, influential, fastest growing form of communication, social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all under the control of Trump partisans?
I think it's pretty scary. I think all of the kind of gut feelings that I had when I started this film, what's happening is by the time the film comes out, it's all happening. In the film, we have this kind of moment when we shifted from the way the world used to be, kind of this idea of democracy was everywhere and spreading, and it was a good thing, to this idea of authoritarians who have taken over and control all of our kind of existence. And we call it the event. And I feel like we're in that moment. Every day, some of our freedom is removed. Something else is changing. Some law comes in. The idea of peacefully protesting becomes illegal. The idea of having a Zoom call to talk about the idea of doing some sort of protest because you're worried about the climate can lead to you going to jail for 5 years just by talking about it. Just by having a Zoom call, you can end up in prison. So I feel like we're in a moment of change, and in a moment where those of us who have an opportunity need to be speaking up as much as we can. The thing that I've always found, which I don't like, is when people say the next generation, they're great, they'll fix all of our mistakes. And I'm like, it might be too late. We're the grown-ups. We have to do something. We have to speak up. And we have to, because we're old enough to remember what life was like before the tech companies. So we have seen the shift.
True.
There was a life before that. There was a time when I could travel freely in Europe, and I cannot anymore. Someone sold you that lie. Someone sold that to you. And to begin with, maybe get off those apps.
It's a very good point about the life before social media. It's true. When I look at my kids, they've never known a life without it. I'm glad I did know a life without it. I'm an addict now, but at least I wasn't once. I have to be honest. I'm an addict.
You have to get your kids to look at your screen time and see whether you're online.
Oh, my kids warn me all the time that I'm online too much. I'm an addict. What can I do? You mentioned that you started making the film, I think, in 2020. Is that correct? Is that what you said earlier?
During lockdown, yeah. I was stuck at home and I just thought something's going on.
But did you think, because you're making it in 2020, obviously the election happens, Trump loses. Yeah. There's a moment, there's a window where you think, all right, fascism has been pushed back, people have recovered their senses. Joe Biden was talking about uniting the country, healing the country, winning the battle for the soul of America. That didn't turn out so well for him. But in 2020, do you think, well, actually, I don't need to make this film now. We've turned a corner. We're on a path away from this. And yet here we are 4 years later, back to Trump 2.0.
Yeah, that came up a lot while making a film. That came up my financiers, that came up lots of the notes. And a lot of the notes, particularly from my US execs, were, why is Trump in the film? Take him out. He's over. He's old news. People are sick of hearing about it. And I kept thinking of the film as a time capsule. Each sequence is a moment of time. And essentially, it's our last decade, right? All of this happened in the last 10 years. You have the financial crisis, 9/11 financial crisis are the two kind of key points that it seems like the world changed, particularly from the US point of view, but it affected everyone. And I just thought, well, even if he's gone, the people who believed in him and who voted for him are still there. The people who supported him are still there. So even if that's like changed, there's still a group of people, which is half of the population in the US, who believed in that. So for me, it just felt like it's still relevant. It's still important to show what was going on and what was happening around the world and the common themes. And of course, no one really knew what was going to happen. But by the time the election comes around again, and that's how long it takes me to make a movie. You could say it's basically one election cycle. I started a film and it was motivated by the Trump election in 2016. I started a film in 2020. By the time it comes around, this circle just keeps spinning. You're going to go ping-ponging from one version, one party to the other, and one party and back again. And I don't know what's going to change in the US unless the political system changes, unless the way you vote changes, because I can just see this continuing on. And whatever happens in the US, there's always a trickle down to the rest of the world. If the richest and most powerful people and the tech guys are all in power now, then that will affect me. That affects everyone all over the world. In the Philippines, in India, in Latin America, in Africa, we're all affected by these tech companies. And there's a battle going on which is different. And I think the idea that we're all in sync now, I don't think that's going away in a hurry. I think that's normal now. I don't see how we can ever go back to life before that.
You start and end the film the same way, with a message from the main character in this dystopian 2073 world. She writes, "I hope someone finds this. No one said or did anything to stop them. It's too late for me. I was alone. It may not be too late for you." Is there still hope for us? How do we reverse the democratic backsliding, the fossil fuel endless burning, the social media addictions? You're a hopeful person?
As a person, I'm very positive. Yeah, I'm an eternal optimist. But you're allowed to be an eternal optimist, but also be realist and look at what's happening and can see the signs and how it's affecting you and affecting people around you. And I think the reason I wanted to make the film partly was to connect the dots for an audience. If you've had a kind of gut feeling something was going on, you see the film, I'm hoping I might have explained something a bit more in detail or shown you things that you didn't know as well as the things you did know. And really, the film's there to create dialogue, for us to be talking now, for you, for me, for everyone to be saying, well, what can we individually do? I don't think it's as simple as putting a neat little moment at the end of the film and saying, if you do this, everything will be great. I think the struggle is much more complex, and the fight for kind of freedom and democracy is much more layered than me just saying, go out and vote. You know, there's something else going on here, and we're going to have to talk about it. And I think partly it starts at home. It starts with you. It starts with your kids. It starts with your family, your parents, your aunties and your uncles. But then also a kind of wider community about what are we going to do to protect ourselves from what is happening. We're not crazy. This stuff is happening. And I think the film, part of the process of showing it has been almost like therapy for people. We've had screenings. People come in and go, you know, I've been talking about this to my family and no one's listening to me.
Yeah.
It's all happening. So I feel like for you and me to be connected via this film, I see you talking to your group of people over there and I've been talking over here. And I feel like the film is the excuse to get us saying, this is serious. What are we going to do about it?
It is a great excuse. It is a great film, a must-watch documentary. I urge everyone to go watch it at 2073.film. If you're in the US, you can see how to watch it there. If you're in the UK, it still has a theatrical run. Check out the film. Asif Kapadia, thank you for making it, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Really good to talk to you. Cheers.
Welcome. Wow.
You purchase a Twitter whip to do something for charity.
There's a new set of kings that nobody voted for. And they have more money and power than any corporation ever has.
Tesla boss Elon Musk is now the richest person in the world with a net worth of $185 billion.
Facebook's got $46 billion in cash. The cash flow somewhere around $10.5–11 billion.
Google's parent company Alphabet surged. For the full year, revenue rose to nearly $75 billion. That now makes Alphabet the world's most valuable company, ahead of Apple.
Just want to jump in with some Amazon numbers. Revenue, $89 billion.
They are powerful not simply because they have all the money and the wealth, but because they've amassed all of the information.
Age, gender, ethnicity, religion, what car you drive, what products you purchase in shops, what churches you attend, how you see the world, what actually drives you, how open you are to new experiences, whether you prefer order and habits and planning in your life, how social you are, how much you tend to worry. Big data is an understanding of your personality, because it's personality that drives behavior, and behavior obviously influences how you vote.
These technology companies have become behavior modification systems for sale to the highest bidder.
We are worth more when we are dead slabs of predictable human behavior than when we are as living, breathing, informed citizens of a democracy We are worth more when we are addicted, outraged, distracted, polarized, and disinformed than if we are living, breathing, free humans and citizens. Technology domesticates us into the new kind of human.
The last time human beings were commodified, it was the age of industrialization, and it was labor. And when labor was commodified, we had sweatshops, we had factory lines, we had child labor, we had exploitation of our physical bodies. Now, what's commodified is not our physical bodies, it's our attention. So what are they going to do next?
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to zeteo.com. Your support matters.